All right, welcome everybody. I just launched a poll in the chat, so um, check that out when you guys get a chance. But let's get started. Um, Welcome to Onyx Backcountry's Masterclass on how to plan a winter hut trip. My name is Kelly Klein. I'm the Community Marketing Manager here at Onyx Backcountry, and I'll be helping out kind of behind the scenes today. We are recording the session, so if you'd like to rewatch or share this class, it will be up on YouTube, hopefully later tonight, depending on how fast it can upload. We've also got a Q&A box open, and this will be active during the whole class, and it is staffed by our awesome Onyx customer service team. So if you have any questions about the app or questions that aren't related to the class, but maybe like you have a question about your own membership, please drop them in the Q&A box, which is separate from the regular chat. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you should see chat and Q&A. And then if we don't get to your Q&A questions during this session, we'll make sure to follow up with you later this week. So stay tuned. And of course, you're always welcome to chat with other attendees. Looks like no one's joined in yet, but the chat will be open. And if you do have questions about the class itself, please drop them in the regular chat, and then I'm going to be compiling them for Jason and Andy at the end of the class today. All right, next slide, Andy.
Test out the chat. Tell us where you're tuning in from. It's always cool for us to see where folks are tuning in from. Is it the mountains? Is it plains? Are you in the south, north, west, east?
Colorado Springs, Denver. People are all over the place. Salt Lake, Washington. Sweet.
Awesome.
All right, so here is what we're covering today. First, I'm going to share the discount code for you all to access a special offer for Onyx Backcountry, and then we'll get into some introductions. And finally, Jason's going to walk us through everything you need to know to plan a winter hut or yurt trip, including why hut trips are such an incredible way to experience the backcountry, the different types of hut systems to consider, how to choose the right hut or yurt, how to plan and research for a hut trip, and Jason's also going to walk us through some cool case studies. And then throughout the session, Andy is going to be jumping in with questions and insights from a product and mapping perspective. So he's going to help connect what Jason's talking about with how you can use Onyx in your own trip planning. And Andy's also going to drop the link to a folder on Onyx Backcountry that shows you a bunch of huts we compiled in Colorado. So it's a really cool way if you just want to see what's out there, you can discover these huts, and the folder is free for you to use. So definitely make sure to check that out. And then we will wrap up the class with a Q&A, and this is where I'm going to ask Jason and Andy the questions you have for them, specifically about the class, not about the app. And these will be questions that you dropped in the regular chat during the class, where you're putting in where you guys are all coming in from. All right, Andy, next slide. Actually, can you go back to the discount? Okay, yeah, perfect. So this is where you guys can scan the QR code and you can get 70% off both Onyx Premium and Elite, which is huge. So for an Elite membership, it's usually $100 a year, and with this discount, you can get it for just $30 a year. And then Premium drops from $30 to $9 a year. And then I'm also going to share the link in the chat. So if you don't want to use the QR code, which I understand, you can just follow that link and then that'll take you to the discount page as well. All right, next slide. So now we can meet our hosts. Jason Antin is a professional mountain guide and avalanche educator for the Colorado Mountain School, and he's based in Colorado. Originally from Massachusetts, Jason has spent 2 decades guiding across disciplines from alpine climbing and ski mountaineering to endurance-based backcountry adventures. He's highly trained in risk management and wilderness emergency medicine and is known for creating safe, inspiring experiences that build confidence and connection in the mountains. Also, special shout out to the folks over at the American Mountain Guides Association for letting us borrow Jason for the night. And if you don't already know, AMGA sets and maintains the highest standards for mountain guiding through education, training, and certification for mountain guides and climbing instructors. So, thank you for being with us today, Jason.
Thanks for having me, Callie. Um, yeah, take it away. Let's get Andy looped into the mix.
Yeah. So joining Jason is Andy Sovick. He is a product manager here at Onyx Backcountry. And he is also the founder of Beacon Guidebooks, which is the leading publisher of backcountry ski guidebooks. Andy is based in Gunnison, Colorado. So we got two Colorado guys here today. And Andy has dedicated his career to helping people explore wild places with confidence. He works with local experts, authors, and trails organizations across the country to bring reliability and responsibility to Onyx's tools. So thanks to you both for joining us. And with that, Jason, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
Thanks a lot, Callie. I appreciate you having me, and I couldn't think of a better way to spend my Tuesday evening with you all. I'm really pumped to be sitting here in front of my computer next to Andy, and we're going to talk a little bit about hut trips tonight. I actually did my first hut trip out in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. That's where I grew up, but now, as Kelly mentioned, I live in Golden, Colorado with my two little girls and my wife, Jenny. Kelly, how many people have let us know they've been on a hut trip before?
So we have 173 responses, and actually 77 people said yes, and 96 said no. So it looks like we have a lot of people who have never been on a hunt trip.
Excellent. So you're all a great audience for us to dive into why we go on hut trips and how the heck do we get started. So as I mentioned before, I went on my first hut trip in New Hampshire, and now I live in Colorado, and I want to talk about why they provide such incredible experiences. And so for me, the hut trip is a way for us to really immerse yourselves in the backcountry for multiple days. It gives you that chance to really get out there in the winter environment, but still being sheltered from the elements to a pretty significant degree, right? They offer a lot of shelter, a lot of comforts that maybe tent camping or day trips don't provide. Additionally, they allow us to put ourselves into incredible terrain and really get ourselves back there into more remote environments and give us access to runs and routes and terrain that we might not be able to hit from a single day trip. And additionally, hot trips are just fun. Like, I have some incredible memories from just talking about the day's adventures around the dinner table, sitting by the fire. I mean, hut trips are just an incredible way to experience the backcountry.
What's your like most memorable, not only the most memorable hut experience, what's the best hut that you ever been to in the world?
Oh, in the world? Well, Andy, I did just finish booking all of my my European hut trips for the spring, and they're quite different, right? So I'd have to say, sure, some of these huts out in France or Switzerland are incredible. Some of them are more like hotels. A lot of the Colorado huts are really cozy and have really fostered some incredible memories. But I'd say number one would have to be the Huntington cabin out in the Harvard cabin out in Huntington Ravine out in Mount Washington, because I have, on more occasions than I'd care to admit, have stumbled through the doorway and begged for the hut warden to let me spend the night because the weather was so rowdy. So I'd have to say the Harvard cabin out in New Hampshire.
Nice, good choice.
All right, so here's the deal. As I mentioned, there's huts all over the world. There's huts all over the US. And I do want to use Colorado as a little bit of a working system because it's my backyard and I have probably the greatest familiarity with that one in the US. And specifically, we'll talk about the 10th Mountain Huts. And there's a lot of options, right? So we've got the 10th Huts, we've got yurt systems throughout the country, and we also have privately owned and operated cabins and lodges. And I think for this case study, we'll talk about Colorado, but I just want y'all to know there's lots of options out there. So the biggest spotlight, 10th Mountain, right? A lot of people know about this hut system. It's very well supported. It's pretty organized from an online presence. And there's 30 plus huts that are all interconnected throughout Colorado. It's the largest, independent hut group in the US. And there's a ton of variety here, right? We've got some really localized huts to some ones that are really tricky to get to.
For those that don't know, can you explain why are they called 10th Mountain? Like what's the story there?
Yeah. So the history behind this hut system is that it actually stems into kind of military training. And right. So back, I don't know the exact year, Andy. Do you know off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, no.
So these hut systems were used for basically winter scenarios and simulations for the military to train, specifically the 10th Mountain Military Unit. And that unit is the one that specializes best in kind of outdoor mountainous warfare strategies and techniques. And so they have used not only the hut system, but also linking hut to hut training simulations in their training. And that's kind of an age old history that's carried over to recreation in the non-military world. I want to talk about a few other options, right? So we just talked about the 10th, but there's also options for private yurts, right? We've got the Never Summer yurts up in northern Colorado. There's yurts all over the San Juans. And then this photo here is actually the Colorado Mountain School yurt, the company I work for. This is the Seven Utes yurt, which is about an hour west of Fort Collins, just between Fort Collins and Steamboat. And this yurt was built, I think, 4 years ago and provides an opportunity for 16 people to spend the night there, should they choose, and a lot of backcountry terrain. But my point is, sure, we labeled this talk a hut talk, but I don't want you to forget about the yurts because those also provide some pretty incredible winter backcountry experiences.
And I often think when I think of a backcountry yurt, I think of this like little tiny, basically like glorified tent. When you go to the Seven Utes yurt, it's like it's like a cathedral in there. It's friggin'
Oh yeah, 6 burner commercial stove, got a refrigerator in there. It's definitely on the spectrum of glamping. It certainly sways towards high comfort. So here's where things get interesting, right? So I know for me, the first time I ever went on a hut trip, well, aside from me stumbling into the Harvard cabin on an ice climbing trip gone south, often someone invites you to join them, right? So for a lot of people, that's their first step into the hut trip world is someone says, hey, listen, we're going, you want to come along? And so I think that's a great opportunity for folks to experience it if they get invited. But then there comes the time where you want to facilitate the experience or you want to take the initiative and make this happen for you. And so there's some things to talk about on how we actually come to determining what hut we're going to go adventure at. Certainly, it has to do with where you live, right? So you want to think about like what's close proximity to me? How far do I want to drive to get there? What sort of hut experience do I want to have? How many people does the hut fit? Like how many friends do I actually want to go on this experience with? And then you also want to look at, what's the experience beyond the inner workings of that actual hut? What sort of terrain am I shooting for? Am I looking for tree skiing? Am I looking for meadow skipping? Am I looking for steep skiing objectives? A lot of that's going to go into how I select where I'm going. In addition to where's the good skiing, where are the bads, right? So what sort of hazards might I be anticipating when I go on a hut trip? Are there avalanche considerations on the slopes I want to ride? Are there avalanche issues just getting to the hut to begin with? And then also for me, my partners are so important to my backcountry experience. And so when I'm planning a hut trip, I want to make sure I really take into consideration what's the group goals and objectives? What do they want to ski? What's their fitness level? What are their skill levels? Andy, do you have anything to add as far as how you think about like putting a hut trip together?
I think, yeah, the first things that come to mind when I'm planning a hut trip, I think, are group size. Like there's some huts that have max capacity, and that just makes a big difference for whatever it is I'm planning. And then the next one is really avalanche terrain. I think it's the biggest variable for me planning. It's a super stressful experience to plan a trip, be the trip leader, and if I'm not an IFMGA guide, which I'm not, I don't want to be the de facto guide and get that expert halo and lead everyone into avalanche terrain. So it really is, like you said, like thinking about the group and what kind of terrain you want to get into and the size. I think those are probably like the 3 biggest things, like when I'm in a zoomed out trip planning mindset, like where should we go? Those are the variables that I'm thinking of first.
Totally. And of course, making sure you invite folks that are really good cooks also amplifies the experience for the better.
Yeah, who's going to bring the gummy worms and yeah, that's these are all very important details as well.
We can go to the next slide, Andy. So once you've kind of zeroed in on what sort of hut experience you're looking for, again, that goes into proximity, not only how far of a drive do I have to get, but how far of a tour is it going to take me to get to the hut? What sort of terrain is there? You actually have to figure out, how am I going to lock this thing down and put it on the calendar? We're not going to get into the nitty gritty of how to do this exact process for every single hut system out there, but it does vary. So for example, a lot of private cabins have their own website and you just need to book directly through them. If you're going to book a yurt, some of them are private, some of them work along a yurt system. Again, you got to book directly through the site. When it comes to the 10th Mountain Division huts, this is a 10-month out process, right? So in late January, they talk to some of their commercial outfitters to get things locked in. That's 11 months in advance. And then in February, if you're a member of the 10th Mountain Hut system, you have an opportunity to submit into a lottery. In March, that lottery gets kind of opened up, reviewed, and cleared. And then between April and May of that year, or the year prior to the season, things open up for basically open booking to members. After that, it ends up to be rolling for members and non-members. And then if this screenshot here was taken last week. So there are things still available, but as you can see, typically the holidays, the weekends are typically booked up well in advance, but it's not too late to get in on a hut trip this season. You just have to figure out how to get on that site and get a crew together, follow the steps that Andy and I are sharing with you tonight, and get things locked down.
Yeah, it's all over the place. There's like we just booked some yurts in Southwest Colorado recently. They opened it up in August and you had to call them by phone. There's in Gothic, north of Crested Butte, where I live. I think those reservations haven't even opened yet. So it's usually the beginning of December. So it's just all over the place. And yeah, Jason's main point here is start researching, start looking into it. Google's pretty good tool here, and figure out what the system is. Canadian huts, it's like often a couple years out, right?
Oh yeah, a couple years out. And then I think the biggest thing to know is, as you start to get good at planning this, just do some research, start investigating, different websites, different options, and then get on mailing lists. A lot of times, each individual hut owner will send an email out saying huts are opening up like next week, and that gives you a chance to kind of get in there and get things done. Additionally, I often will put calendar reminders on my Google Calendar that says like, these huts open this date, European huts open on this date. And so I just remind myself not to miss out on when the huts are going to become publicly available.
Yeah, that's a good tip, really, is getting onto those websites. If they have any notifications, getting on the email list. Last thing we want is more spam, but someone letting you know there's an opening is, in my opinion, not spam. That's just good news.
Totally. So let's talk about how to dive into planning on a deeper level, right? So I've got these really cool paper maps that I've been using for years. If you're part of the 10th Mountain Hut system, they actually send you this really neat map with all of the huts that are laid out on the topographic map. The European hut system, the Swiss huts, there's the same thing, but it's like 100+ huts. It's pretty neat. So we've got good old fashioned paper maps. We also have guidebooks that are readily available. I'm sure Andy can speak a little bit about some of the guidebook options that are available through Beacon Guidebooks. And then, of course, we've got lots of digital resources, which I find to be incredibly helpful, specifically Onyx, and that's why we're here tonight.
Yeah, it really is. When I'm thinking about these trips and just planning anything, whether it's hut trips, backpack trips, camping, hiking, I think in a zoomed out mindset, like I really think like, where am I going? What do I need to think about? And I slowly start zooming in. It's pretty cool that the online tools that we use follow the same process. You can really start zoomed out and start working your way in a detail sort of way, and just in a spatial like map sort of way. So, and fear not, we'll get into that, and we'll start driving around the map here, and I'll show you some of the ins and outs of the map, but not yet.
So I want to talk more about how I think through that planning process. And for me, it all starts with, like it should any backcountry ski tour, what are the goals and objectives of the group? And so I think it's super important that when you put a trip together, the first thing you do is you don't necessarily just pick the objectives. You've got to pick the team first. And so define who that group's going to be and what are the goals and objectives of said group. Once you have the goals and objectives of that group, and they can vary greatly, right? They can be anything from, we would just like to be in a hut in the winter and just enjoy each other's company, sit around the wood stove. Or they can be, no, we've got these ski objectives we really want to get after, and anything in between. Once you have goals and objectives of the group, that's going to allow you to narrow down what are your hut or yurt options going to be. And you can start thinking about what yurts or huts might work given these options. Then once you've picked options, you need to start figuring out, like, how do we actually get there? What does the route look like? How do we get in this thing? How do we get out of this thing? And how does weather impact our ability to actually get to that hut? There are actually some huts that exist that will not let you check in if it's considerable avalanche terrain or higher. So it really is important that you have a good understanding of what sort of terrain this hut's in and how is weather or conditions going to impact my experience. And then, of course, not only does getting there, not only is getting there important to avalanche terrain, but also how does that affect my skiing and riding options, right? So you really need to be able to assess avalanche terrain and then come up with option A, B, C, D, E, F to have a good time.
Yeah, just a clarification. You said that there's some huts that don't allow you to even go there if there's considerable danger or higher. You said terrain, but it's Jason meant if there's considerable danger or higher.
Yes.
Then they close it, and that's also just a good mindset. If there's considerable danger, is really a time to question your hut trip, no matter if they allow you to or not. That's a good time to look in yourself for a decision.
So we put together 3 different huts or yurts, and we want to run you through a little bit of a case study. So this is one of my favorite huts in all of Colorado. I go here at least once a season, usually either for an avalanche course or with private clients, or just on my own time with a big group of friends. And that's the Peter Eston hut. We have ranked this as a moderate hut because it's actually, it's not, this one's not roadside. This one is about it's a few miles into this hut, over 2,000 feet of vertical gain. And the terrain here gives you options for a variety of ski touring endeavors, right? So you've got everything here from tree skiing to very steep commuting slopes that really open up in the later winter and spring. And it provides basically several options, but it does require a little bit of work to get in there. This is one of the 10th Mountain Division huts. It sleeps, I think, 16 people and has a pretty cool kitchen, pretty cool sitting area. So that's case study number 1. Andy, do you want to pull up the Peter Eston hut on a map for us?
Yeah, we'll get into it. Well, and you'll have to help me find it because it's your favorite. I've never been to Peter Eston.
So go to Vail, Colorado.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
I'll see, like, just when I'm playing with the map and trying to find something like the hut, before I just like type it into the search, before I really just zoom in, I usually like to get my map right. So I have, and a lot of customers have, way more than I do, a lot of content. I have a lot of stuff in there. As I start zooming in, there's just a mess of things in there. There's a bunch of routes depending on what mode I'm in. If I'm in hike mode, mountain bike mode, ski tour, or climb mode, there's routes. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in there. What I really like to do, especially when I'm in the planning phase of something, is really start with the cleanest map possible and start with the base map that I have, that I want for this particular purpose. So we're getting into ski terrain. I'm an old guy. I like to have a nice clean topo map to start with. So a few of the things that I do, this is just driving around the web map, showing off a couple tools that we've built this year. So one of the first things I do is toggle off my content, and that really cleans things up. There's another way this is a fairly new feature that we have. There's another way to clean up my content, but still have some control over exactly what content that I see. And that's on the left side here. I see the My Content folder, and I can click on that 3-dot ellipsis and I can hide all. And for the case of this presentation, we'll show huts and yurts, but I can go through all of my content in here and decide what exactly I want to see. And I can even go inside of those folders and hide and show all the other little things inside my content. So it really helps with getting a clean map right from the start. And then as I zoom in, we're going towards Vale and Summit. I'm sure of that. I see that I'm in hike mode, and I say, well, I don't want to be in hike mode. We're talking about backcountry skiing here. Not that you can't book some of these huts in the summer, but I might go into ski tour mode. Once again, I say I like to have a clean map, and I see there's a whole bunch of ski routes here. I'm not planning on ski routes right now. I'm just looking for huts. So I'm going to click filters, and I'm going to toggle off show routes once again, just to get that clean map. If I need any of those things back again, I'll pull them up. So now I'm actually getting into a clean map. I see this is the all these little brown waypoints are my personal content that I've built. These all belong to that folder that I just showed all of you called Huts and Yurts. I've got 83 huts and yurts in here so far, and I'll share this folder in the link in the chat with all of you, and you can go in now that we have collaborative folders. You can check out the folder too. Okay, I think I'm ready to get to the Peter Eston hut.
Well, Andy, you've got Onyx is throwing us a softball here because I can see the huts labeled, but you're going to want to go a little bit to the west, kind of towards the Eagle Edwards direction. Yep. And then you're going to head south. And if you zoom in, you can see that those, I just saw New York Mountain was to the north of that. Yeah, right there. And that one cool thing about this circuit to begin with is the most northern hut here is going to be the Polar Star hut. And then if you head south, you'll hit Peter Eston, and you actually can continue on to the Harry Gates hut. And so if you're into these hut to hut traverses, just like the 10th Mountain Division, use these huts to facilitate trainings. If you want to go hut to hut, this is actually a pretty good circuit to go from Polar Star to Peter Eston to Harry Gates. And so you can see right there, that's the Polar Star hut where that hut icon is right next to Polar Star Lake. And then if you go south, we should have hit the Peter Eston hut.
Here's another hot tool tip for you guys. If I hit settings, there's this setting here that says waypoints. I can show custom waypoint names and see what I labeled things. Sometimes if you have a whole bunch of waypoints, it gets pretty messy. But if you're ever just like, what was that? I don't want to click on it. I'm just browsing. You can select that show custom waypoint names. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then of course, right, Andy? So like, how do we get there? Where do we park? There are technically a few ways to go, but the main way is you can actually see up to the north. You'll see the Yeoman Park campground. And that's kind of going to be your biggest landmark as far as getting over to the Peter Eston hut. And so the road actually, you can drive through in the summer, but it is actually gated at that trailhead. And so now you're dealing with two different major ways to get into Peter Eston. One you can see is that obvious road that goes all the way up through Yeoman Park, right, Andy? That's four-wheel drive road as indicated on the Onyx map. And then you also have a more direct way, which is over to the east, and it kind of just goes straight up through that drainage. Yeah. And so, yep, 100%. And Andy, I don't want to cut you off because you're giving us a great tour, but I just wanted to point out, so we have a trailhead, and now we know there's two more or less straightforward ways to get there.
Cool. No, let's work together on this one. Do you want me to, like, we could build a route there. We could just explore the terrain. We could check out slope angle, but what's your structure?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, especially one of the benefits of using an offline mapping tool like Onyx, is you're going to lose cell service here. So before you even get to the trailhead, you're going to lose cell. So whether you're a habitual downloader of Google Maps, I usually just put Google Maps away and I pull out the mapping tool I'm going to be using for the entire hut experience. And so for Onyx, I'm already going to mark the trailhead. So once I'm on that road, I know where I'm going to be parking. And then I've already identified two ways in. And so, Andy, let's go ahead and just map kind of the long way. So let's build a route from, and actually that trailhead, you can park anywhere from the Fulford Lakes Highway, but anywhere around Yeoman Park. Yeah.
Okay. So when I hit Route Builder, which is this icon up here in the toolbar on the right, I see the option right away to do either a snap to, which is like that magnetic route building snapper, or point draw, which doesn't doesn't magnetically snap to anything. It just draws wherever you want it to. So in this case, it looks like we'll be using a road to start with. So I'll use snap 2, but if it ever gets fussy on me, sometimes there's a whole bunch of intersections, or I want to go off a road or off a trail, then I move over to point draw, and you can do that throughout the process of route building. So I'll start here, clicking once, and then you'll see it just like as I move my mouse, it goes up the road. Is that where we're going up?
Yep, you're nailing it, Andy.
Cool. So I've only clicked twice, and I'm just magnetically snapping up that road. And then here, do I want to stay on the road, Jason, or on the trail?
You can do either. Once you get to this point, you can see the contour lines are much wider. So a reason for going in this direction is twofold. One is it is, as you'll see, once Andy finishes, you can stay on the road, Andy, just for the sake of finding this. Yeah, either one's fine. Once you get to this section, your goal is just to kind of work your way over towards the hut. And a reason you might choose this route in opposition to the more direct route is avalanche conditions, right? So there are a few areas that do actually have some overhead hazard when you're getting, from the car straight to the hut. Another reason is going to be carrying a sled or carrying weight. And so, for example, one of the beauties of going to a hut is they have these kitchens. So we can put together incredible dinners and bring in lots of fun supplies, but it's a little bit of a ways in there. And if you go the road, the grade actually stays quite mellow the entire way. So it's much more accommodating to, dragging a sled in there with food and beverages, things of that nature. Versus, as you'll see, the other route is much, much steeper. Additionally, if you're not an advanced skier, descending the direct way is much more difficult than the route that Andy has mapped out here. So if you're maybe newer to backcountry touring and you're a little bit stressed out by tight trees, the road's going to provide a great option for you. The downside, it's much longer as far as distance goes. So Andy, can you let us know kind of the distance and vert that you were able to pull from the route that you just built?
Yeah, so I built the route. I turned on slope angle shading to illustrate what Jason was talking about. And once I saved it, I went ahead and clicked on it, just tapped on it in the web map there. And it pulled up here, I'll go back into, here's another hot tip. If you're looking at your map and you're like, what am I looking at? And there's all these colors, and I don't know what direction is north anymore, even though this compass is telling me, but I still don't know which way I'm facing. A really easy way to get out of it is hit this 3D button on the bottom right, and that'll snap you back to north, up, and two-dimensional, and I can get back into that just that simple view, and you can always go ahead and clean up your map again and be basic. But yeah, so what you were getting at is now I can look at the route. I see as I slide my cursor along the elevation graph, it moves that dot up the road as well, and we see the distance and elevation gain.
Yep, exactly. And like I said, best reason to use this route that has greater distance is it's not as steep in a short period of time. So if you're carrying a lot of weight, it's not as hard, that you spread that vert out over a greater period of time. Additionally, I think we all know this is a road, but Andy could go to satellite imagery and you can see that it's wide open. So if you're just kind of getting your ski legs under you, you can see that it's much more wide open the entire time. It's a road. You're essentially skiing a road. And of course, it also does not have, almost any overhead avalanche hazard. So should you decide to go into the hut when the avalanche danger is elevated, the road might be your best course of action.
Looks like there's some pretty good glades there.
Some great glades there, Andy.
Okay, where are we?
And you can map it out if you'd like, but you're going to see kind of the same result. So if you take the more direct route, you're going to see that route climbs significantly more vert in a shorter distance. So not only is it going to be steeper on the way up, it's also going to be steeper on the way down. And it's also much tighter trees. So the skiing is much more advanced, especially on the exit, especially with a heavy pack on tired legs.
So that's up this gully here.
Yep, just goes right up that drainage, Andy. It pretty much stays on the summer trail, but if you're skiing it, those switchbacks come at you pretty fast.
I believe it. Yeah, I can see there's a pretty steep north-facing slope right here that I'd be a little concerned about.
Yeah, and actually, you know, once you map out the terrain, you can turn on slope shading, and you can see that you are, by choosing that route, you are certainly in a tighter feature with some steeper slopes overhead.
So turning on that slope angle layer once again.
Yep.
By the way, within the next month, we'll see the avalanche terrain exposure layer appear on this part of the map as well.
And Andy, it's actually a pretty small slope, but like work your way towards the car. And there's a red spot. It's actually more, yeah, it's on the right side of the trail, right there, right next to the trail. Yeah, I've actually seen that slide down to the trail before. It's the slope's not very big, but I have seen kind of a big old crown up on that slope before, believe it or not.
So if I was planning this with my team and with my friends, I'd probably, while I was mapping, I'd probably go ahead and put a waypoint there. Actually, like as I'm going up the trail, I'd like to put a waypoint there to just tell my friends, hey, this is a hazardous area. Ooh, there's a nice exclamation point, nice in red. So when I share the trip planning folder with my buddies, I'll say, let's say decision making point one at a time, assess risk, something like that. And I would add that to my trip planning folder, and that way everyone could see, and we've all agreed we're going to stop and talk about it there and see if that is the way we want to go, or if we want to turn back around and take a different route.
And so, yeah, Andy, I mean, the list goes on as far as how meticulous we can be with our planning on the way there. Sometimes I'll go as far to, you know, calculate timing, put in like brake spots that I think are void of hazard, and, you know, a certain amount of vertical gain into the trip, just so I know, hey, this is a good spot for a break. I remember seeing this from my desktop. A lot of things go into planning, but the biggest takeaway I want y'all to have is you really need to be mindful with what does the approach look like? You know, what sort of from a time perspective and exertion perspective are myself and my team looking at by getting here? And then do I have options? And like I said, with something like the Peter Eston hut, you do have options. You can certainly take a much more mellow grade, but longer route, or you can punch it right through the trees and get there faster, but just know it's a steeper experience with more overhead hazard. And then, of course, Andy, anything else you want to add about the approach? Because the next thing I'm thinking about is, where am I going skiing?
Read my mind.
So with something like, and Andy, I'll let you drive us through this, but, you know, I'll tip y'all off. A lot of the terrain at Peter Eston is just to the east there, and then kind of the south and the southeast from the hut. So you're kind of working that terrain directly south, and then also east and southeast. Yeah, so that ridge line that you see right in front of you that's covered in snow gives you a lot of options to either side of the ridge, as well as right around the hut. So there's actually a shot out of Peter Eston that we call the back. There's a back porch and there's a front porch, and they actually, one of them drops right out of the hut into that bowl, that big open bowl that Andy's got on the screen. Yep, right there. Some amazing mini golf skiing, right? So by mini golf, I mean just wide open, great terrain, but short shots. You can kind of recycle that terrain over and over. I've had some great mornings where that's just full of powder. And then you also have some stuff that kind of heads up the ridge, kind of through the trees again to the east. And that's the back porch, is kind of like towards that trail. Yeah, kind of all that terrain in the glades there. There's that open shot that you can see. Yeah, the snowy covered open shot. Yep, that whole thing. Yeah, that's the back porch. Yeah, and so you can kind of ski that. And then those are things that can provide a great, just like quick access skiing experience for you without going too far from the hut. You can easily go out for a morning and then go back to the hut for lunch, and then go out again and enjoy the afternoon, and then make it back for après and dinner. If you want to go a little bit bigger, you're going to work with that ridge. So you can kind of take your time working up the ridge. And then most of the time midwinter, you're going to want to be super mindful of avalanche conditions here. And the ski terrain, once you go up on this ridge, are going to be very dependent on conditions. But that, before you go too far, Andy, yep, that big slope kind of, yeah, right around there. And then also dropping in back towards the drainage below the hut offers some tight tree skiing. And then also some great skiing just up on that slope, which gives you a little bit of a high alpine feel. Some of the steeper lines here are going to be actually to the other side of Charles. Next one up, next drainage. Keep going along the ridge, Andy. Yep, right around here, you start to get to some steeper shots that, in my opinion, are really only appropriate when you have a good understanding of what the snowpack and snow conditions are. Andy, you can turn on some slope shading if you want, but you can see that the terrain does vary quite a bit here. So you do need to be paying attention about what sort of terrain. Yeah, exactly. So you can see just to the right of your cursor, you can work with some lower angle slopes and have some incredible runs in that terrain. That's a great spot too. Other side though, Andy, was the one that is more complex. If you spin us around, yep, right there. So you can see to like right where your cursor is quite steep. But however, to the right of your cursor, there's actually some great runs that I've had that kind of works with some of that lower angle terrain. And then there's actually some really fun but short shots to the left of your cursor, kind of up along the ridge. Yep. So you can kind of work that entire ridge.
Yeah, one thing I look for when I'm turning on slope angle shading and exploring an unfamiliar area, like if I was planning a trip to Peter Eston, I do pretty much what Jason's guiding us through. Like I look for trees. Sparse trees are amazing, which is kind of what I see here. And then I look for my favorite color palette with the slope angle shading on, which is green, primarily green with yellow speckles. So I automatically gravitate towards these. A green slope's great, but what I really like is these green slopes with some yellow speckles, meaning it's like 12 to 15 degrees slope angle that's pretty low angle. But like if it's a stiff base with a little bit of pow on top, that's some of the best stuff out there. But you really don't get to tip over into happy hippie turns until 25 degrees or so.
Yeah.
Just last year, Onyx put this green layer into the slope angle shading specifically so that we could paint the cool stuff. A lot of times like 15, 20 degrees, like with the right conditions is super awesome. And now instead of that just being a blank color on the map, we actually have highlighted that in green. So another hot tip.
And then one thing Andy mentioned, and he's definitely selling this place well, but go ahead and turn on satellite imagery again, Andy. We're talking about tree density. This place took me a couple tries to really nail. So if you kind of zoom in, Andy, to the right where you are, if you just zoom in center screen, yeah, like it's great skiing. Yep, good. And a little bit left and down.
Down here.
Perfect. Yeah. You can see that like you do have to work a little bit to nail your line through those trees leading into the basin. So you can see some snow in there. And if you nail your line, it's great, but you certainly want to do some research. If you get sucked into that shaded gully, just left of your cursor, it's still actually incredibly fun skiing there, but you have to know where you're going because the trees do get quite tight in there, quite tight in there. And it actually also can be steep. So if the avalanche hazard is elevated, there are a few pockets that I know to avoid in there as well.
Love it. Yeah, that looks. And can you see these glades from the hut? Like, is everyone just staring at these while they're sipping coffee?
You're just staring right at them. And like one of those that best run is right where that open meadow is. It's super short. Right there. But it's so fun just to ski right down to the creek and then put your skin track back in. And so, using a tool like this, like I would be also like figuring out where am I putting the skin track in. So I have this escalator ready to go for my weekend trip out there.
Love it.
Let's look at another case study, Andy.
Let's do it.
So let's not get, actually, this one, I'd love to look at this one. So this is actually the CMS 7 Utes yurt. There's some major differences from the 7 Utes yurt to the Peter Eston hut. First off, it's roadside, right? The parking lot is literally a couple hundred yards from the yurt. And it's really easy to get to. It has incredible terrain for just touring right out the backyard, but it's got a very varied very varied options for you within driving distance to nearby trailheads. You can also skim to them, but they'll certainly add a little bit to your day. As far as fitness levels go for the Peter Estin hut, it could be a total beginner experience to very advanced, depending on what sort of riding you want to do. Cameron Pass, where this yurt is located, offers quite some varied skiing and some very steep lines as well. This is a private hut that's owned by the Colorado Mountain School, so it is privately booked. During the winter, a lot of the weekends are locked down due to avalanche education courses, but a lot of the weekdays are wide open. And this thing is slightly different from some of the other huts in a sense of its kitchen is quite immaculate. So it's got a refrigerator, it's got propane heating and a wood stove. It does have solar powered electricity. So depending on the type of experience you're looking for, just know there's a lot of yurt and hut options out there that can most likely accommodate what you're going for. Andy, you know where this is, but it's in northern Colorado. And I don't necessarily want to run through the step-by-step planning that Andy and I did for Peter Estin hut, but that's exactly what I would do should I select this. Andy, do me a favor. The Peter Estin hut, I learned through years and years of trial and error, really narrowing in where the good skiing was. But you have something that's going to help you out with Cameron Pass, and that is that there actually is some guidebook lines available for you to see on Onyx in this zone. So unlike Peter Estin, which isn't quite as dense with the Beacon Guidebooks information, boom, there you go. So you can see where the hut is. You can see how close it is to the road. So it's super accessible for someone who's just trying to have their first hut experience. But you also have a little bit of help here in starting to figure out like, where the heck might I go? So instead of turning on slope angle, which you should anyway for avalanche hazard, but instead of having to go through and comb through the terrain bit by bit to figure out where I might go skiing or riding, you do have a little bit of a heads up here. And so what Andy did there is he clicked on that icon for the zone, and you're going to get information over there that tells you the nearest snow tells. It's going to give you visual photos, and it's also going to give you pre-marked ski runs and approaches. Andy, you're the wizard when it comes to this information. What other insights might you share here regarding kind of the preloaded guidebook information?
This is a special spot for me. This is where I grew up skiing this stuff as a teenager. Rodney Lay is the author of this particular guidebook, the Beacon Guidebook for Cameron Pass, and he's been skiing there for 50 years. So quite the source of information, Rodney. What's good to know about navigating the Beacon Guidebooks information? First and foremost, I think it's good to know that it's all about planning when it comes to guidebooks and guidebook information, especially in Onyx, because you might not necessarily have that out in the field. This is not information. Like all this rich content you see in the sidebar over here isn't always available offline. So it's really good to plan the stuff in advance, bring something tactile. When you're using this guidebook, look at all these details that we added for the approaches, for the zones. I clicked on that 7 Utes West zone. The way Beacon Guidebooks creates backcountry ski information is on a zonal basis. So we basically try to draw a polygon around a zone. It's a bit loose, but usually we think about skiing various zones and then we try to define them. So we pack a lot of information into them. Their aspect, the avalanche terrain exposure, otherwise known as AITS rating, how we go about getting there to that zone, driving, parking, things you need to know about that zone. And then it gets into, like, once again, I think about like zooming out to zooming back in, approaches, the descents, and this is really where you just start to integrate that ski information with the map. So I think for Cameron Pass, we do have the avalanche terrain exposure scale. This is another really good way to go about planning. Jason, I know you've worked with it quite a bit and have been following the AITS journey from Canada for a long time, but this is a painting on the map relating avalanche terrain exposure to everybody. This is not saying what's easy or difficult or really difficult. Green, blue, and black means simple, challenging, and complex. Simple terrain is just that. It's terrain that's quite simple for the avalanche, for avalanche conditions. And then as it gets usually steeper with more consequence, more terrain traps, more common wind loading, things like that. You'll get to see challenging, and then complex terrain is just that. It's usually quite complicated. You have multiple avalanche paths overlapping upon each other, more high consequence terrain traps, and so on. So that's a layer that I turn on a lot when I'm planning ski trips, maybe not necessarily my daily ski trip in my backyard here, but if I'm going to unfamiliar terrain, AKA hut trips, I'm using this layer as much as I possibly can, along with any other tools that I can.
Yeah, Andy, I think that's great. I mean, we can go so deep into the nuance of planning, but as Andy demonstrated with Peter Eston hut, I'm going to start with big picture, like where's the hut? How far is it from the car? And Andy he mapped his route, and we know the vertical gain and we know the distance. And then it's like, okay, great. Where are we going to ski? And that's when you start to really pull out slope angle, the 8th scale, aspect, right? You really want to know all these things to determine, like, is it going to be good? Additionally, it's seasonal, right? Like your aspect is so important no matter what, but gets real important if you happen to score that kind of late spring hut and you're really chasing corn and you want those more southerly aspects. Andy, anything else you'd share about kind of the Onyx functionality when it comes to Cameron Pass?
No, I think we'll try to stay high level here. I think we've already mentioned that we're going to do basically this is hut trip planning 101, and then in about a month here we'll do another masterclass that's the 201 class, and really gets into the grit of more planning when it comes to getting into avalanche terrain. The more planning, the better. But yeah, let's go to the next one.
Yeah. And then the last one I just want to zero in on is, Andy, if you want to just go right to, well, let me talk through this slide first. First off, this is the most complex of the case studies that we brought up, right? So Peter Eston is a little bit in that moderate level. It can accommodate both beginners and advanced, no question. And when I say beginner advanced, I don't mean your downhill ski ability. I mean your ability to travel in the backcountry from a fitness and decision-making standpoint. The Cameron Pass yurt, the CMS 7 Utes yurt, like I said, it's roadside, so you can have a very mellow experience and not really do anything other than walk back and forth from your car if you need to. But then the Eisman hut's a different story here. So there's certainly a ticket to entry here, right? You've got to ski 6.5 miles over 3,000 feet of gain, and getting there is no small task, not only from a fitness standpoint, but more importantly, from an avalanche hazard standpoint. So you really need to have your A game on when you are planning your tour and getting into this piece of terrain. So yeah, Andy, if you just want to go right there, and then just pretty much, yep, exactly. It's just northwest of Bald Mountain is how I always find it. Yeah, I mean, if you just turn on the slope angle, you just kind of see that things are more complex. You've got a lot of different aspects that you're dealing with constantly. So you're kind of like working your way around different terrain features, different aspects quickly. And so not only does the approach require not only some fitness, it requires some decision-making, and then also the ski terrain is also very varied and also requires additional decision-making that I think is elevated beyond that of, say, the Peter Eston hut. Cameron Pass, the yurt, does have a lot of very simple, challenging, and complex terrain, but you have your choice. Eisman certainly puts you into a spot where you're going to be dealing with some more avalanche terrain, and decision making will be higher.
Yeah, we see it looks like it's right on top of a challenging patch of terrain. So definitely good to know about. But it does seem like there are some options for arriving there in a fairly low hazard way.
You can definitely get there. There have been there's actually well-known documented accidents of folks both getting to the hut and then also some burials from folks recreating there. So again, I selected the Eisman because it's phenomenal terrain. I mean, it's really great hut as far as skiing and riding options, but it does require some thought.
Yeah, I feel like and this is just another thing I do when I'm trying to learn terrain, is I turn on everything, right? I'll turn on the satellite, I'll turn on hybrid, I'll turn on topo, heats, slope angle shading, aspect, and see what pops out at me. And just as you were speaking here, and I turned on this snow imagery, that's when it hit me. I do see now, I see these terrain traps below these glades. I see that it's really easy to get into some high consequence terrain. That's an easy walk that if we're just staring at that all day, I could see the group getting pretty tempted to just waltz into there and get into some pretty high consequence terrain right away. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So, like I said, we don't need to dive into too many tools that we've already addressed, but I think this one's certainly worth investigation from those of you that have the skill set, have the avalanche decision making toolbox. But it does require more thought than some of the other HUD options available out there.
Love it. The eights layer that I'm toggling on, I think it's probably just good to mention. We are by the end of this month, we'll be releasing triple the amount of avalanche terrain exposure scale coverage that we currently have. So a whole bunch of new areas, and then we'll be doubling that again within the next couple months. So just if you're waiting for it in your area, just keep watching. We're working on it as hard as we can, but of course, with something as high consequence and in need of so much validation from professionals and really going through the quality assurance process, it does just take time, and by and large, we're pretty proud of that. So, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, Andy, I think it's just good to kind of see it all laid out for you. We just picked, there's only 2 10th Mountain huts out of the 30 here, and then 1 yurt. But just know there's a lot of options out there, and I thought it would be neat to kind of compare a few of them. And you can see here, there's just a variance in distance, elevation gain, available terrain, and of course the hazard. So it's just really good to know, there's a lot of options out there, but learn how to kind of compare them and know what goes into how to compare these different huts.
Going to drop that the folder to, I think I got 80 huts in there. Huts and yurts. I'm gonna drop that folder into the chat, and we'll also put a link to it in the YouTube recording on the Onyx Maps YouTube channel later. But I'll make sure to share that map with everybody, or that folder with everybody, to be able to load into their Onyx.
So as I think Kelly mentioned in the start of this is part of a 2-part series. So the goal of tonight's webinar was to give you all a little bit of insight into what's going through myself and Andy's head when we're like thinking about these hut trips, right? So think about it starts with a group, and you want to know what are the goals and objectives of that group, and then take those goals and objectives and start to apply it to terrain, and then what huts are available in terrain around you and the places you live in. Know that there are so many different hut options from Europe to Colorado to Utah, Montana, New Hampshire. They're all over the place, but now it's your job to figure out what's available, get on those mailing lists so you know the registration process, and then start planning using some of the tips and techniques that Andy and I share with you. Step 2, the next phase, is going to be, what do you need to pack? How do you actually gear up for these things? And how do you get yourself set up for that hut trip once it's already on your calendar and the booking's been made? A little bit of homework for you. Start playing around with the Onyx tool and figure out all of the functionality that Andy kind of walked us through tonight. Figure out the slope shading, figure out how to map your approach, figure out how to find ski runs and see exactly what they might be like on your desktop. So when you go out there this winter or this spring, you have a really good idea of what's going on.
Love it.
And that's all I have. Again, my name's Jason Antin. I've been working with Onyx for a few years, and I do work with the American Mountain Guides Association. If you have any questions about boning up on those backcountry skiing skills, or perhaps you're looking for some avalanche education, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll also be heading to Europe to explore the huts this spring. So if that's been on your bucket list, please shoot me an email.
Thanks, Jason, and thank you both for the past hour. Super informative, and we got really good feedback. Everyone was so stoked to learn about the new avalanche layers, and that's kind of where we have the most questions. So this first one might be, is better for you, Andy. In terms of eights and all the avalanche layers, are you working on expanding them in Canada, or is US the priority?
We are expanding them into Canada. Yeah. So slope angle shading is available and live for everyone from the Bering Strait to Mexico. So that's already there. You've got high definition 3D topo. You've got 3D offline in Canada, and the avalanche terrain exposure scale. We are planning on expanding into there. Timing, no idea. But yeah, we definitely want to bring. I mean, we want to bring eights home, right? Like it was invented in Canada. It's widely used in Canada and well understood by the recreational and professional community in Canada. So yeah, we're really hoping to get into there.
Sweet. And this question is maybe better for you, Jason. What do you think are some common mistakes that first timers make when they're planning a hut trip?
I think that's a great one. So I think it's often easy to get into some of the tougher to get to huts late in the game. So if you weren't on it with lottery reservations, you will see that, like, the Failure Hilliard hut or other huts that are quite a ways in are potentially available to book a little later in the game sometimes. And I think that folks underestimate the approach for, if they've loaded up their backpack, they've got a bunch of great meals planned, they have all their stuff for the hut trip, and then they kind of underestimate the effort it's going to take them to get to the hut. And so I strongly encourage folks for their first hut trip to go with someone who's had some experience who can kind of guide you a little bit into what to bring, or you can join in for our next webinar. But also start small. Don't go too big and end up being out, 4 hours after the sun goes down, because that unfortunately happens more often than not.
I'd say one of my favorite ways to introduce huts to someone, if someone wants to do a hut trip and someone also happens to want to do an avalanche class, you can put those things together. You can do a hut-based avalanche course. It's a great way to learn how to do huts. It's the best way to do an avalanche course because you're in the field, you're looking at the snow, you're eating the snow, you're tasting the snow, you're in it. It's by far the best education for avalanche, I think, and you're also on a hut trip. So if you were thinking about doing both, why not put them together? It looks expensive until you think about it that way, and you're actually saving money. So, and yes, Jason does teach them.
I don't know why I didn't think of that, Andy, because you just gave me the best plug ever, but I couldn't agree more. My favorite avalanche courses to teach are indeed hut trips. And yeah, I won't restate everything Andy said, but they are incredible for all of those reasons.
This is a great follow-up question to that, Jason. Have you ever had a hut trip not go as planned, and how did you adapt?
Oh boy, did I ever have a hut trip not go as planned? I think it depends on what you define as being planned, right? So it's like, going into it, I typically know what my hazards are. I typically know what the objectives are. And so I think a lot of, things going south have to do, from experience in general, have to do with poor planning. And so I'd say for those that happen to relate to not, planning, we're all weather dependent. So I have been at a hut and I was planning to be there for 3 days, and we were in terrain that was going to expose us to hazard, and a storm came in much higher than expected. And so we did have to leave 2 days early. We just packed up and jetted as soon as that snow started accumulating. So that's my biggest hut trip not going as planned, at least as it pertains to typical hut trips.
That sounds like best case scenario for a trip not going as planned.
I will add another quick one. I was at a hut in Greenland, and I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks, and we left the first afternoon due to a very bad injury. My buddy is now okay, but it turned a 2-week Greenlandic hut trip into a 4-hour hut trip. Yep.
Yeah, you always have to think about things like that happening.
We had a hut trip it was in the Maroon Hut in Gothic, north of Crested Butte, and we went in as it was snowing. It was low danger going in, and we got in there and it just dumped and dumped and dumped, and we basically couldn't get out until
Yeah.
until things settled down, which was good. But then getting out it's normally like a 4 mile slightly uphill ski on a road. It took hours to get out of there. So it was overall a good experience, but it got a little wild there for a minute.
And Andy, this is pre-Onyx days, because these days there's really no excuse for getting this lost. But I do have a friend that spent 2 nights out unintentionally trying to find a Colorado hut. They just couldn't find it. It was buried in snow, and they literally spent 2 days walking in circles and camping because they needed to, and then ended up never getting to the hut and leaving.
Was it this hut? Was it Friend's hut?
It wasn't Friends.
Okay, because Friend's hut is notorious for people just going right by it and getting lost.
Yeah.
It's just tucked away in the trees in a little pocket, and people just walk around here and there and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
Andy, people are loving the folder where we have all the huts preloaded in Colorado, and we have someone wondering if we have any preloaded huts available in other states, and if not, if we're planning on doing that.
This folder actually encompasses, I'll zoom out. There's Colorado. I got some in Utah. I got some in the Tetons there, threw some in Washington and California. And even, let's not forget,
Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm talking about.
even some Appalachian Mountain Club huts. So I'll keep adding to those, and yeah, give me a request. Where else should I add these? These are just I'm guys, I'm just Googling huts in New Hampshire, huts in New York, and I go and find them, and I look for them on the map, and I use satellite imagery, and I find the pin. Sometimes the website gives the coordinates, and I'm putting them in there. And once I have made the pin, I put the booking information in the notes for myself to use and for all of y'all to use, and just pay attention to that. So that's, to me, the most important information, but there's a bunch of other information that Jason brought up here that is good to start researching, but really location and then the website.
Cool. Will you drop that link in there again, Andy? It looks like a couple people are searching for it.
Yeah, well, hey, that's a teachable moment. So whenever I'm sharing content, if I've created a folder, I can hit that share button and I can copy link. So I'll do that right now, and I'll post it in the chat. And once again, we'll put in the comment in the we'll put in a link in the YouTube description as well. But I can also manage access to that folder. So who do I want to share it with? And then what kind of access do I want to give them? Do I want them, like, I could share this with Jason and say, hey, like, draw some routes, drop it into the folder, put some waypoints for your secret glades, and only you and I will see them. And then we can adjust access for the current members. We can say view only for people. We can allow them to contribute and save it. And since I'm the owner of the folder, I'm the only one that has these. Jason wouldn't have the ability to turn on and off controls and things like that, but really helpful tool for this exact thing, for planning trips, sharing with your friends. Months out, you can start building a folder and just drop in waypoints, ideas, drawing polygons, drawing routes, and just playing with it. And you'll see each other add stuff to those collaborative folders. So pretty cool.
Sweet. Yeah, we ran a poll during the class, seeing what people are most interested in for the next class when we talk about how to prepare for these hut trips. And collaborative folders was our most popular one. So we'll have to dive into that next time.
That we will.
All right, we've got one last question. Someone is curious how you balance planning for safety, but still keeping the trip fun and adventurous.
Yeah. I guess Andy and I can both tag team that one with our own opinions. I think it really goes back to what are the goals and objectives of the group. And so, if the group just wants to get out there, go for some touring, cook team meals together, like that's really easy to accomplish. If folks really want to get some wiggles in and get some skiing in, understandably, choosing a place that's going to give you a lot of options and potentially low angle options if this is something you're going to be choosing, say, midwinter. And so the more committing the terrain around the hut, the more reliant you're going to be on, good conditions and a good forecast. The more options, the more lower angle the terrain, the more likely you're going to be able to get out there and recreate regardless of unforeseen weather or avalanche conditions. Andy, any thoughts for you?
I think it's the biggest question, and I think your answer is spot on. It's by far the biggest thing I think about. I think the risk added to a hut trip for me as a just recreational trip planner is not a guide, is a group of people making decisions in the backcountry in a hut where you have lots of time to overthink things, lots of time to talk each other into things, and to quite honestly, it stresses me out when I'm doing a hut trip. Therefore, I usually plan my group hut trips in the spring when I have a higher likelihood of well, first of all, of availability. It's so hard to get one in New Year's. But second of all, deeper snow, usually a more stable snowpack. It's not guaranteed, but I'll get more likelihood of that. And then I usually look for those options. Like, is there a hut that is it there's an example of the Opus Hut in near Silverton, Colorado. That's just it's you go through avalanche terrain to get there, and all the options for skiing are pretty high consequence avalanche terrain. So I will only consider doing that if I first of all book in the springtime when it's likely, and then before I leave, make sure that the danger is low. But there's those huts that some of the ones you highlighted, there's tons of them out there that are in simple terrain, have good simple terrain options, and maybe there's some good challenging and complex terrain that you can tiptoe into depending on the conditions.
Yeah, and I'll add real quick, Andy, just to riff off that, like a lot of those hard decisions, I only want to be making those with the partners that I spent more time with, and I have a good relationship in traveling in the backcountry with those folks. If I'm going with maybe newer folks or a bigger group or a broader audience, I'm going to want to give myself that hut with more options that range from very mellow to more advanced.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really it's the hut trip is really fun even if you don't get any wiggles in. So it really to me is it's a secondary objective. If I want good backcountry skiing, I usually stay in familiar terrain. But with good planning, like you keep stressing, you can really line all those things together. And those are some of our favorite hut trips that we look back on, is where everything came together: conditions, stability, friends, sunshine, all the good stuff.
You said it. All right. Well, that wraps up our class for today. Thank you guys both again. This was so informative, and I think everyone got a lot out of it. So everyone, make sure to stay tuned for when our follow-up class will be sometime in November, and we'll dive into more of the details about preparing for trips like this. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Jason. Nice seeing you.
Yeah, thanks all. Same here.